most people have the attitude of like, you try it, didn't work, try something else, it didn't work, start getting frustrated, start trying one or two other things, and your anxiety starts building up and you give up because the stupid computer's not working the way it's supposed to. These are both WebKit-based rendering engines. Why don't they both work the same way? That's how most people are. Web developers, front-end web developers have this insane ability to get lost in the abyss where they actually get energized by that sort of like trying to solve the problem. And they look up 7 hours later, they've solved the problem, and they're like, whoa, it's nighttime. How did I just spend 7 hours doing this? This person hired me to build them a website, and they asked me how much I wanted to charge for building this website, and I said $20, which was a lot to me back then. So I charged $20 to make this website, and that was my first gig. It's just so paradoxical because you actually are better as a web developer if you don't have the formal training. And browsers are really tricky, finicky things. I was always front end on the visible part of the website that you see, not the kind of like back end dealing with hardware and computers and servers and all that. Because front end is more easy to get into, and it doesn't require as much formal education and knowledge in computers. I didn't have to actually have taken a computer science course. I didn't have to know real programming. I didn't have to know Unix commands. That was all stuff that I just kind of like picked up here and there, one thing at a time. When I needed to learn how to do one thing, and so I would pick up in Unix how to do that one thing and slowly get introduced into the skills that I needed to kind of like broaden my range of knowledge. I was getting paid the same amount as some of my my classmates who had a whole degree in computer science, who had taken an entire major worth of computer science and the related math courses and all that. With programming, you kind of like code it, and you know that the compiler will work according to these set rules always, because the computer is never wrong. It turns out you just told it to do something that you didn't realize you were telling it to do. So you're looking at what you did wrong. With the front-end web developer, it's kind of the opposite. The browsers are often doing things wrong. You told it correctly, you followed the standards, but the browsers are implementing your code incorrectly or inconsistently between browsers. Yesterday I was working and there was a standardized feature that I was implementing correctly, and it didn't work on Safari the way that it worked in Chrome. And both Safari and Chrome are WebKit-based browsers. They both use WebKit as the rendering engine, so they even had the exact same rendering engine, but they used this attribute that I was using. They implement it differently. And so the front-end web developer kind of spends their time figuring out what the computer did wrong. And that's a totally different way of thinking about computer science that I think is really different from how real programmers work. And I do think that front-end web developers are real programmers, but there's a distinction. Front-end web developer also needs to have a much broader range of skills that are very specific, broad range of skills, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I didn't really realize that I was preparing myself for a career. When I graduated, my degrees, I had a double major in philosophy and English, which are not super employable. But when I wasn't doing my homework and should have been, I was goofing off, staying up to 3 a.m. making websites, and that ended up being what made my career. So I was able to get a job, and it was kind of like a slam dunk for me. I saw something I wanted to know how to do. I had no resources. Nobody had ever sat down and taught me the basics or the fundamentals of computer science, but I wanted to know how to do it. And you could look at the source code on websites and kind of piece it together. You could do some searches for kind of like articles that would explain it to you. And if you throw enough hours at any task, you can kind of like figure it out. And so I would do that. I would stay up until 3 a.m. working on a stupid image rollover for a menu, or figuring out some new layout. And eventually, I got to a point where I was putting together real websites. You have to have this ability to kind of just endure through the depths of the abyss until you come out on the other end, not only having solved the problem you were working at, but having built up a lot of knowledge with all the things that you tried that didn't work. Now I kind of I know my way through the caverns a little bit better, so I don't get lost in the abyss for as long. There are some foundational pieces of knowledge that you can have that'll help you get out of the abyss quicker. And some people say that's a bad thing in learning because you need to spend that time in the abyss. But I think that if you have the foundational knowledge to kind of navigate your way around, if you have an idea of what's down there and the basics, I think that you can still learn all the stuff that you learn getting stuck in the abyss, but you get out of it faster, you still have that knowledge, you still solve the task at hand. So I think it's actually advantageous to start with the foundation of knowledge of, not just, what is HTML and CSS, but how are they used? What is the purpose? What are the kind of philosophies and techniques and strategies that web developers have figured out? Web developers kind of have a built-in compass that they've developed that helps them navigate through the maze of chaos and get out faster. And so I don't think that inhibits your learning. I think that it improves your learning if you have that foundation. And it's way beyond just learning the language. It's learning strategies and techniques. It's learning kind of it's getting past that initial steep learning curve. And starting one level up. So if you can get past that initial steep learning curve, then you're just going to be more efficient at learning. You're going to learn faster. You're going to learn better. You're going to learn deeper. When you don't know anything and you're working through a problem, you try 100 things. You don't actually understand most of what you're doing, and so it doesn't stick. But if you've got that foundation, maybe you only try 10 things, and maybe you get through the problem quicker, which some people would say, well, that means you lost all of that training time and learning time. But I think that what happens is those 10 things you try stick better because you understand what you're trying better, and you get able to move forward faster too, and that enables you to move on to the next thing and move on to something more advanced. I think I don't have anything else to say on that topic.